On the Buses was one of Britain's most iconic sitcoms, delivering endless laughs with its cheeky humor, unforgettable characters, and everyday misadventures. It brought working-class comedy to the forefront and became a cultural staple of 1970s television. But behind the raucous laughter and on-screen antics, the real lives of its stars were often marked by hardship, personal struggles, and untimely farewells. In this emotional tribute, we remember the talented cast members of On the Buses who gave us years of joy, and whose lives came to poignant ends. Their legacy lives on, even as the curtain quietly fell on some far too soon. Reg Varney was born on July 11, 1916, in Canning Town, East London, an area soaked in soot and struggle. His father, a docker, could barely keep the family afloat, and young Reg often went to bed hungry, his dreams clouded by the fog of poverty. But even in the gloom, he found a flicker of escape at the piano his mother rescued from a junk sale. That battered instrument would become both his comfort and his curse. Known to millions as Stan Butler in On the Buses, Reg became a symbol of working-class charm, a cheeky bus driver with a heart of gold. But the Reg behind Stan was nothing like the grinning rogue on screen. He battled fierce insecurities and the ache of feeling like a clown trapped in an image he never fully embraced. He yearned to be taken seriously, to be recognized for more than laughs, but the industry had already cast its verdict. In real life, Reg was cautious, melancholic, and haunted by failure. His attempts at film and music after On the Buses fizzled. When the series ended, so did the applause. Offers dried up, and he quietly drifted into obscurity, feeling discarded by the very stage that once lit him up. Tragedy followed him into his private world. His marriage to Lillian Flavel, though lasting over 5 decades, was often strained by long absences and his silent bouts of depression. The couple had one daughter, Jean, but even fatherhood couldn't fill the hollowness fame had left behind. Reg turned to painting in his later years, quiet, solitary work that mirrored his state of mind. It was as though he was trying to paint himself out of memory, not into it. On November 16, 2008, Reg Varney died in a nursing home in Budleigh Salterton, Devon, after a chest infection at the age of 92. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at £1.5 million, approximately $2 million. A modest sum for a man who once made a nation laugh, yet could never laugh quite the same himself. Stephen Lewis was born on December 17, 1926, in Poplar, East London, into a working-class family caught in the grip of economic despair. His father died when Stephen was young, and the weight of responsibility fell on his fragile shoulders too early. He spent much of his childhood in silence, walking the soot-covered streets with a notebook, scribbling poems no one would read. The laughter that would later echo through television screens was nowhere to be found in those early years. To millions, he was Inspector Blakey Blick, the grumpy, mustached foil to Stan and Jack on the Buses. His catchphrase, "I'll get you, Butler," became legendary. But off-screen, Stephen was a man locked in quiet torment. Fame embarrassed him, he never believed he deserved it. Acting was supposed to be his salvation, yet it only deepened the divide between who he played and who he truly was. Critics dismissed him as one-dimensional, and when On the Buses ended, so too did his steady purpose. He drifted through minor roles and pantomimes, often walking off sets in silence, hollowed out by typecasting and creative rejection. Stephen never married. Rumors whispered, but he remained resolutely private, as if intimacy would expose too much of his fragile self. He lived with his sister for most of his life, and when she passed, he became increasingly reclusive, wandering the streets near his flat in Wanstead like a ghost who never quite belonged. Loneliness became his closest companion. He refused interviews in his later years, preferring solitude over forced smiles. The man who had once made millions laugh couldn't bear to laugh himself. As he aged, he battled Parkinson's disease, a cruel thief that slowly stole his speech, then his mobility, and finally his dignity. Stephen Lewis died on August 12, 2015, in a care home in Wanstead, East London. He was 88. At the time of his death, his estimated net worth was around £500,000, approximately $750,000. A lifetime of work, distilled to a number, while the sadness he carried could never be measured. Bob Grant was born on April 14, 1932, in Hammersmith, London, into a family clawing its way through post-war hardship. His father, a tram driver, and his mother, a homemaker, lived paycheck to paycheck. Bob often escaped into books and radio plays, dreaming of stages far from the gray, smoke-choked streets outside his window. But even from an early age, he struggled with crippling self-doubt and waves of melancholy that he learned to mask with humor. He became a household name as Jack Harper, the flirtatious bus conductor in On the Buses, charming, cheeky, full of life. But behind the scenes, Bob's life was a desperate struggle against the darkness that constantly pressed in. Unlike Jack, Bob was not easygoing or self-assured. He was sensitive, emotionally fragile, and quietly drowning in mental illness even at the height of his fame. When On the Buses ended, the offers stopped. The industry, once welcoming, turned its back. Typecast and aging, Bob was left with nothing but silence. That silence became unbearable. He attempted suicide multiple times in the 1980s and 90s, each time surviving, but returning more broken. He wrote plays, tried revivals, even worked as a minicab driver to survive. Each job was a reminder of the career that had abandoned him. His marriage to Kim Benwell was one of the few anchors in his turbulent life. She stood by him, even when he descended into despair. But Bob was often withdrawn, lost in thoughts he couldn't share, plagued by feelings of failure and rejection. He wanted more than anything to be taken seriously, as a writer, as an actor, as a man. But the shadow of Jack Harper clung to him, refusing to let go. On November 8, 2003, after years of battling depression and declining health, Bob Grant took his own life at the age of 71. His body was found on railway tracks near his home in Twyford, Berkshire. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated to be less than £100,000, around $150,000. A man who once made millions laugh, Bob died in silence, haunted by the fame that had made him, and then left him behind. Michael Robbins was born on November 14, 1930, in Croydon, Surrey, into a modest, devout Catholic household. His father worked on the railways and money was tight. He grew up reserved, introspective, and often unsure of his place in the world. While other children played carefree in the streets, Michael was more comfortable alone with books or reciting verses from the Bible. Faith, for him, was a shield, something to hold on to in a world that rarely made sense. He found recognition as Arthur Rudge, the sarcastic, henpecked husband on the Buses. With his dry wit and constant digs at his on-screen wife Olive, Arthur became a cult figure in British sitcom history. But off-camera, Michael bore little resemblance to the grumpy, lazy character he portrayed. He was deeply intellectual, gentle, and somewhat shy. The laughter his lines provoked rarely reached his own eyes. As On the Buses soared in popularity, Michael found himself boxed in, forever associated with a character he'd grown to resent. Offers became scarce, and more serious roles evaded him. He turned to the stage and took smaller parts, always hoping for something deeper, something to prove that he was more than a punchline. But that moment never truly came. He struggled with feelings of artistic failure, a quiet grief he rarely voiced. His marriage to actress Hal Dyer was stable, even warm, but not without pain. They never had children, and Michael often seemed lost in solitude, grappling with the invisible weight of unfulfilled ambition. He remained polite, courteous, and professional to the end, but friends noted a sadness that never quite left his eyes. Fame had given him a voice but denied him the depth he craved. Michael Robbins died on December 11, 1992, from prostate cancer, aged just 62. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at approximately £250,000, around $400,000. A gifted actor with the soul of a poet, he left behind a legacy shaped by laughter, but lived a life mostly in quiet, sorrowful silence. Anna Karen was born on September 19, 1936, in Durban, South Africa, to a British mother and an Irish father. Her early years were shadowed by a culture of repression and harsh discipline. She was bullied for her weight, for her accent, for simply wanting to act. At the age of 17, she fled to London alone, chasing a dream too fragile for the cold world she'd soon face. In smoky clubs and rundown theaters, she clawed her way into acting, but the pain of abandonment never quite left her. She became a household name as Olive Rudge in on the buses, the frumpy, awkward sister with thick glasses and a pinched voice. Audiences howled at her expense, but Anna endured it in silence. She was nothing like Olive, graceful, thoughtful, and often crushed by how people confused her with the character. The fame brought by Olive became a double-edged sword. It opened doors but locked her in a role that suffocated her. As the series ended, Anna's career stalled. She struggled to find serious work and was constantly typecast. Bit parts, pantomimes, brief soap appearances. Nothing gave her the creative fulfillment she craved. The laughter that once echoed around her now came too rarely. She fought to remain relevant but felt invisible in an industry that glorified youth and mocked age. Her personal life carried its own grief. She married actor and comedian Terry Duggan, but though they remained together until his death in 2008, their life was marked by long separations and emotional distance. They had no children, and as her friends passed and the spotlight faded, Anna found herself increasingly alone, clinging to old scripts and the fading echo of laughter that no longer felt meant for her. On February 22, 2022, Anna Karen died tragically in a house fire in East London. She was 85. At the time of her death, her estimated net worth was around £200,000, approximately $270,000. For a woman who gave so many their smiles, she died in flames and obscurity, unseen, underappreciated, and far from the applause she had once so humbly earned. Terry Duggan was born on April 15, 1932, in the gritty borough of Hoxton, East London, an area where struggle was stitched into every brick. Raised among dockworkers and laborers, Terry learned early that to be heard, you had to entertain. And so, with a mischievous grin and an instinct for timing, he became the class clown, always performing, even when no one asked him to. But the laughter he inspired in others rarely made it back to him. He found work in the thriving British comedy circuit, making a name in clubs and variety shows, and eventually appeared in several episodes of On the Buses between 1969 and 1973, often in blink-and-you-miss-it roles beside his wife, Anna Karen, who played Olive. While she earned national fame, Terry remained in the margins, the supporting act to someone else's spotlight. And though he never said it aloud, the shadow of being the lesser-known partner wore him down. He once joked, "They remember Olive, but never the bloke sitting next to her." It was a joke that didn't quite hide the sting. Terry struggled with alcoholism in his early years, a quiet battle fought backstage and after hours, when the clubs emptied and the laughter stopped. Sobriety came, but the damage lingered, in missed chances, in roles lost, in the aching question of what he could have been. His marriage to Anna Karen lasted nearly 50 years, one of deep loyalty, though never easy. They were a pair both bound and burdened by the same frustrations, aging in an industry that forgot quickly, and being remembered only for one role, or not at all. They never had children, only each other and the echo of applause from a time long gone. Terry's health declined steadily in his later years. He faded from the public eye, quietly, as if excusing himself from a party he never felt invited to in the first place. He died on May 1, 2008, at the age of 76. His net worth at the time of his death was around £100,000, approximately $150,000. A gifted comedian, a loyal partner, and a man who spent his life making others laugh, while quietly mourning how rarely anyone looked past the punchline. Doris Hare was born on March 1, 1905, in Bargod, a coal mining town in South Wales. She was raised in a theatrical family, living on the road and backstage as her parents toured in vaudeville acts. But the sparkle of grease paint couldn't hide the reality. She grew up with no fixed home, little stability, and a constant ache for permanence. Even as a child, Doris learned to wear a mask before she understood the cost of wearing one. Audiences knew her as the loving, no-nonsense mum in On the Buses, stepping into the role in 1970 and immediately becoming the warm, grounding presence of the series. Her character fussed, scolded, and held the chaos of the house together with tea and sharp words. But Doris's real life bore little resemblance to that maternal strength. Though she had decades of theater behind her, she often felt invisible in an industry that dismissed older women. Recognition came late, and never as deeply as she had hoped. Her long career included everything from the West End to wartime entertainment for troops. But despite her skill, she was rarely cast in leading roles. Dependable, they called her. Solid. Words that sounded like praise but felt like dismissal. Even the part of Mum was handed to her only after another actress left. She had become, in her own words, the understudy of life. Marriage brought little relief. She wed RAF pilot John Fraser Roberts, but their bond was more out of necessity than love. They had children, but Doris spent long periods away from home, always touring, always working. She often spoke of guilt for choosing stage calls over school plays, for losing time she couldn't buy back. As she aged, work dried up. She withdrew quietly from the spotlight, her once famous face now forgotten by a new generation. She lived her final years in a nursing home, far from the footlights, watching the world she once belonged to move on without her. Doris Hare died on May 30, 2000, at the age of 95. Her estimated net worth was around £150,000, approximately $220,000. She spent her life playing mother to millions, but behind the scenes she was just another woman trying not to disappear, remembered too late and loved too little. Cicely Courtnage was born on April 1, 1893, in Sydney, Australia, but raised in England where the theatre was not just a career, it was her inheritance. Her father was a prominent producer, and Cicely took the stage as a teenager, expected to shine. And she did for a time. In musical comedies and light revues, she danced and sang with precision. But beneath the cheerful stage persona was a woman increasingly consumed by irrelevance as tastes shifted and youth passed her by. By the time she made her brief appearance as Mum in the 1969 On the Buses pilot, it was a cameo, a fading star stepping in, her presence more symbolic than central. It was meant to be a nod to her past, but for Cicely, it was a cruel reminder of how far she had drifted from the spotlight. The camera no longer lingered on her. She was there, then gone, barely a memory by the time the series began in earnest. Throughout her career, Cicely wrestled with being boxed into light comedy, dismissed by critics who never saw the depth behind the charm. Her marriage to actor Jack Hulbert was long and professionally fruitful, but personally distant. They were more of a brand than a couple, touring endlessly, always smiling, always on. Behind closed doors, she often struggled with depression, made worse by long periods of creative stagnation and isolation as the industry evolved without her. She wanted to be remembered as more than a relic of wartime gaiety, more than a footnote in someone else's show. But fame is cruel to aging women, and the theater that once embraced her slowly turned its back. Friends died, offers stopped, and Cicely retreated into silence, haunted by a past that felt both golden and suffocating. Cicely Courtnage died on April 26, 1980, at the age of 87. At the time of her death, her net worth was estimated at £300,000, around $450,000. It was a fortune by some standards, but not enough to fill the quiet that followed a lifetime of applause. In the end, she was a woman born to make others laugh, yet rarely hurt herself. John Le Mesurier was born on April 5, 1912, in Bedford, England, to a barrister father who expected discipline and restraint, not dreams of the stage. From his earliest years, John lived life behind a polite smile. Pain, disappointment, even anger. He hid them all beneath a soft voice and impeccable manners. His was a world of understatement, and that became his armor. To many, he's remembered as the mild-mannered Sergeant Wilson in Dad's Army, but he also made fleeting, uncredited appearances in On the Buses. He never chased the spotlight, It always seemed to follow him, reluctantly. His screen presence was subtle, almost ghost-like, as if he never quite believed he belonged there. And in truth, he often didn't. Though he worked steadily, he spent much of his life convinced he was a fraud. His private life was steeped in quiet sorrow. His marriage to actress Hattie Jacques ended not in fiery scandal, but in the slow bleed of affection. She took a lover into their home, and John, ever the gentleman, left silently rather than cause her shame. He married again, but wounds like that don't heal easily. He once said, "I'm not a romantic. I just want to be left alone." Yet even in solitude, he hurt. John battled alcoholism for years, calling it his elegant escape. He drank to dull the sense of inadequacy, the nagging feeling that he had never truly been seen, only observed. His charm, his grace, they were real but also shields. Shields against a loneliness that followed him from stage to stage. In his later years, cancer crept in, silent and cruel. He faced it as he faced everything else, with grace, humility, and a bittersweet smile. On November 15, 1983, John Le Mesurier died in Ramsgate at the age of 71. His net worth at the time was around £200,000, approximately $300,000. For a man who played the gentle observer all his life, his final curtain fell quietly. No scandal, no headlines, just a whisper of a goodbye. And perhaps, for John, that was enough. Which character from On the Buses, TV series 1969 to 1973, holds a special place in your heart? How does it make you feel knowing that some of the beloved cast members are no longer with us? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to share them in the comments below. If you've been enjoying this content, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching.